What's up, everyone? Back in the home studio. I know some of you are getting off lockdown right now, getting back into the workforce. Super excited, super happy for you. Hopefully that happens here soon in Singapore. Anyway, I want to bring you great content. Have a phone here today that has really impressed me. And I'm talking about the Xiaomi Mi 10 Pro. Let's talk about it. Now you guys know the drill. We're not paid or sponsored by anyone unless we tell you to. My thoughts only. Let's talk about this design. Now the design is very reminiscent of other Android phones out there. Okay, you got that waterfall display on the sides, you got the aluminum bezel, glass in the front and the back, but there have been some subtle changes that I like on this phone. First off, let's talk about the color. This is the Solstice Gray. It's sexy. It's a bluish gray down to a dark gray. I mean, it's iridescent, but you see the matte finish on this? It's like a frosted glass. It feels really good to the touch. And the nice thing about this is that it's not a fingerprint magnet. So you know those glossy backs that we usually get on our phones, as soon as you touch it one time, it's just, oh, you want to throw a case on it? You're okay with this. But I mean, a case comes in the box, but nonetheless, I like this feel and look. Now the aluminum bezels around it actually color match the back of the phone, which gives it a nice uniformity. The front of the phone, now this is a large display, 6.67 inch display, but it has a slight little black bezel around it. Doesn't bother me in the least, and it shouldn't bother you, but it's got that waterfall curvature. As you guys know on the channel, I'm not a big fan of the waterfall displays, but I have to give it to Xiaomi on this. They did a really good job of not making it so extreme that you get false presses when you're holding it and using it day-to-day usage. It feels really good in the hand. It feels very ergonomic. Now let's talk about what's inside this. Flagship phone, flagship specs. First off, you got a Snapdragon 865 Adreno 650 GPU, 4500 milliamp battery. The display is a 6.67 inch AMOLED display, 1080 by 2340, 386 PPI for you pixel peepers out there, HDR10 plus, 90 hertz refresh rate. You could do 60 hertz refresh rate, whatever you want out of those two. No 120 hertz, not a deal breaker. The 90 hertz is a nice in between, so you keep good battery life, but you get a little bit smoother display versus the standard 60. Now also inside of this, you've got stereo speakers which sound amazing. These speakers are really good and they're loud. Check this out. Hope you're fans of Linkin Park. I am. Here we go. Mic on the shirt. Now this is at 50%, right? Pretty good, right? Not bad. Sounds like other phones. 100%, baby. And you gotta like Linkin Park. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like going back to the gym. If that ever happens. Anyway, of course it's gonna happen. This sounds really good. Now let's talk about storage for a moment. You have two variants on this phone. You have the 8 gigabytes of RAM with 256 gigabytes of onboard storage. That's the version I have. Or you have the 12 gigabytes of RAM and 512 gigabytes of onboard storage. Now that's a powerhouse of a machine right there. But I gotta tell you, this one runs very smooth, no issues at all. Inside the box, you get a 65-watt charger. Pretty much charge a laptop with that thing. Now, the phone only has the capacity, I think, of about 50 watts, and then you have 30 watts fast wireless charging, and then you have reverse wireless charging. So if you want to be a battery Samaritan, you want to help out somebody on the street, it's like, please, I have no battery left, help me. You can bring your phone and just kind of pop it on there, and you're good to go. But make sure you got enough battery for yourself. What else about this phone? Oh yeah, cameras. Did I forget? Not really. Just playing with you. 108 megapixel camera. I mean, come on, guys. It's a flagship phone. You got the flagship camera in it right now. Next, we've got a 12 megapixel camera with a 50 millimeter focal length to that. Now that's very unique for a smartphone camera. We usually don't see that out there. That is sort of the focal length that our eye sees day to day. I mean, that's what we have on full frame, and I have a lot of 50 millimeters here. It's my favorite focal length. It's a very welcome addition to have it on this camera. Then you have an 8 megapixel camera, which is used for telephoto, and a 20 megapixel ultra wide camera at 16 millimeters focal length. That's really gonna give you that nice perspective if you wanna capture great architecture, you know, landscape, a little bit of distortion, but it can be corrected. On the front of the camera, you get a 20 megapixel selfie camera. Now, here's the thing with all these cameras. Optical image stabilization is in only two of the lenses, the 108 megapixel and the 8 megapixel telephoto. The other cameras do not have it. We'll talk about that in usability in just a bit because it can be a little bit challenging at times. But nonetheless, that is the camera system. Now let's talk about usability. Now, the first thing I do when I normally get a phone for review is I jot down my initial feelings of picking up the phone for the first time. You know that first feeling? It's like you open up the box, you pick up the phone, and it's like, you know if you're gonna have a love affair or you know it's gonna be a challenging relationship. And the Mi 10 Pro felt really, really good in the hand. Very ergonomic. I gotta give the Xiaomi engineers some credit on this one. They did a great job with the nice balance, with the thinness, the weight, the curvature. It's 208 grams, so it's not the lightest phone out there, but it feels really premium. Then I turn it on, and the display, beautiful, beautiful display. As I was setting it up, one thing I noticed is very Google-centric. And then I realized, looking at the box, Xiaomi wanted you to know that too. Underneath the Mi 10 Pro, it says, with easy access to the Google apps you use most. Oh, mic drop. Gonna leave that right there. Went through setting up the phone and I realized there's all the Google apps there. Google One, the podcast apps, the YouTube apps. I mean, pretty much everything is on this phone. And also another thing that's interesting is, you know when you get an Android phone, a lot of the times you get these proprietary or third-party keyboard apps, and some of them work okay, and some of them are just like, can I find another one really quick? Out of the box, they have it loaded up with my favorite keyboard, the Google keyboard, the one that you get on the Pixel. It's on this. I like that keyboard. It's simple, large size keys. It's easy to type on. It's fantastic, and it's stock. It's the stock keyboard. Hats off to Xiaomi for that. Then after you're done setting it up, you're introduced to MIUI, which for the most part, some people like, some people don't, because it has sort of an iPhone-esque feel to it. It's still very easy to navigate and understand and use. And, you know, I mean, if you keep it to the classic theme, it looks like close to stock Android, you know, for the most part. But besides that, I mean, settings, everything's very easy to navigate through. It's very simple in that regard. No issues at all. You can do dark mode, light mode, all that fun stuff. Now let's talk about the display, because I mentioned before the display is beautiful. And I thought the display was like a higher res display than it was because they really did a great job with it. But here's the thing with Android phones and displays is they can be really hit and miss. And the reason is because of the colors. Obviously, back in the day, saturation was the big thing. Everybody wanted a saturated display. It's hard as a content creator to work with a saturated display because if you're trying to edit a photo or a video, you're trying to make sure that it looks good across all different devices as much as you possibly can. And when you run across highly saturated or highly vibrant displays, that's a challenge. But Xiaomi's addressed this. When you go into the display, you can have your standard settings. You can choose P3 color gamut, or you can choose sRGB. Then you can fine tune it from there. Hats off to Xiaomi for doing that. Let's talk about speed and performance. Now, the speed and performance on this is really good. The 865 is a beast. It runs everything. There's nothing that's slowing down or, you know, bogging down. Apps aren't crashing. I'm not getting any of that whatsoever. The Adreno 650 works really well too. And also what's cool is if you want to get into gaming, because you can theoretically game with these specs, is that there is a gaming mode on this phone. So you can sort of allocate a certain amount of power to sort of boost your gaming preference in it. So it's quite interesting. Battery life is also good. I get full day or a day and a half of usage out of it. I mean, you can charge the phone from 0 to 100, I think within an hour. You're covered in that regard. But let's talk about cameras, because cameras, I mean, this is what this phone's about, right? It's about the content creation. It's about what you can get out of these multiple cameras on the phone. 108 megapixel, let's start off there. Beautiful images, sharp, great colors, great detail. It's not a true 108 megapixel camera, okay guys? It's called pixel binning, where they merge pixels together in a sense. But the image is a vast improvement over the standard camera. Also, it has HDR to it, so you get some great dynamic range out of it. However, with the HDR, you're not able to turn it off. So sometimes when you want to shoot sceneries or subjects where you want the blacks to show up more, because with HDR, it's sort of exposing everything. So those blacks become gray or bluish gray, and you sort of lose that nuance to the image. So I wish there was an option to turn off HDR in the 108 megapixel mode. I did find that to be a little bit of a challenge when I'm editing photos after the fact. But besides that, no issues at all. Now, in terms of the speed of the camera, this is something I do want to point out, that it's not the same as using a standard camera in terms of burst mode. Like if you want to capture fast moving objects, let's say a dog running in the park or someone jogging or cycling, you're not going to do it with a 108 megapixel camera on this. It's more of a snap, snap, snap. You get what I'm saying? It's kind of that feel. So it's more like, I want to take a picture of this beautiful landscape, scenery, portrait, That's what this camera is for, and that's what it does really, really well. Now let's move on to the 12 megapixel camera, which has that 50 millimeter focal length I mentioned before. Image quality, really good out of it as well. Great dynamic range, great sharpness, great color. It matches the 108 megapixel camera very well in that regard. You can turn off the HDR in this one though, which is good. There's no image stabilization in this camera. There's only image stabilization, as I mentioned earlier in this review, in the 108 megapixel camera. So you gotta have a little bit more steady hands with the 12 megapixel camera. Not a deal breaker, but it's something to take note of. Now let's go into portrait mode because this camera handles that as well. Now portrait mode works relatively well. I mean, sometimes you get the Van Gogh scenario where you're missing an ear because it's blurred out, but one little trick is just bring down the bokeh so don't have it so harsh, and you kind of bring a little the background back and focus a little bit, and that can kind of recover a little bit what you're missing. It's not 100% like any portrait mode is out there, but it does a decent job. So no issues at all with that. Ultra wide, also the same. Great colors, great dynamic range. I really enjoyed the images I got out of that. Night mode, also good. And the telephoto mode works well too. Now the front facing camera in terms of photography, it's a 20 megapixel camera. So you're thinking, okay, I'm gonna get sharp images or really detailed images. But there is no image stabilization on that camera. So what happens is that you can get some camera shake, and then when you get that, you get a blurry photo. So I do wish there was at least electronic image stabilization in that front facing camera. Maybe they'll add it in the future. I don't know if they can, but it would be nice to have. You have another thing that I found that was very, very interesting, and it's the ability to replace skies. Yes, replace a sky with another, like more clouds, less clouds. I've only seen that on Luminar, which I use here on the MacBook Pro, but in the Mi 10 Pro, so pretty cool. Let's talk about videography now, because we're all in the video nowadays, right? 8K video on this phone. Hey guys, I'm here testing out the 8K on the Xiaomi Mi 10 Pro. Now I'm using the rear camera for this, so I had to flip this around, and I'm just kind of walking around and getting a feel for this camera to see how it looks, how it sounds, how the exposure is, image stabilization, and all that fun stuff. Now, will you use it a lot? Possibly not. It's one of those things where you can do short clips with it, but it's really good video quality out of this thing. I mean, it's sharp, great colors, good dynamic range, it focuses relatively fast. It does take up some storage. So another cool feature they have are these little 15-second clips you can record on. So that setting is right there in the camera menu. It's like recording for Insta Stories or TikTok in that regard. So you can just record right from the app versus having to use the specific application to record those videos. So makes it a little bit easier. Let's talk about the selfie camera in terms of video. Now, this one I was a little shocked on because you're thinking 20 megapixel camera, I'm gonna get 4K video out of this, no problem at all. No. 1080 max, that's it. 720 and 1080. And I was like, huh? Why though? Why? The majority of apps that we use to record selfie video, Instagram stories, TikTok, does not take 4K. So in that regard, you are not utilizing the front-facing camera in terms of 4K. However, I wish that option was there, because if I want to do a more professional video with the rear cameras and then flip it over and match the 4K in the rear with 4K to the front, I could do that if it was there, but now I can't. So it's a little bit unfortunate. I don't know if they can add that in. I'm really not sure, but if they can, Xiaomi, please do so. It'd be nice to have 4K at least on the front-facing camera. There's another app for video that I thought was interesting. It's called Vlog. You can record these small little clips, and then it adds transitions and color grading and cool music, and you can do different templates. It's really fun and cool, just something different you can throw up on social media. I did it at the F1 pit building in Singapore. I was recording myself doing some cycling stuff and just the scenery around, and people were like, wow, that's a really cool video. So yeah, it's fun to do, but unfortunately you can only use the rear cameras for it, and you have to do it in landscape mode. So my overall thoughts on the phone is that it's a really enjoyable phone to use. Not that I was surprised. I've used Xiaomi phones in the past, but this phone just impressed me a lot. And I said that from the very beginning of this video, and I'm gonna say it now. And there are other flagship phones out there that are more expensive, that have a lot of the same feature sets. Yeah, you might be considering those because of the brand or whatever the case is, but I think you should give this Mi 10 Pro a shot if you're on the fence. They've been doing this for a while, and I think that this phone is sort of put them in a different place in the smartphone market now. They have all the Google apps available to them. They are able to bring out all the latest technology. I mean, they were the first phone to bring out the 108 megapixel camera with the Mi 10. And they're trying to push the boundaries a little bit, and the phone delivers. Mi 10 Pro, give it a shot. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the Xiaomi Mi 10 Pro. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Like always, follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube. Be safe out there, guys. Chat to you soon. Take care.